Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Saturday, everyone. And it's been to some people, uneventful couple weeks here as we lead up to the winter meetings in the first week of December. You know, some people are just enjoying the time away from baseball, prepping for the holidays, whatever you may be doing. I appreciate you taking part of your week out to hang here on the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. And if it's your first time here, make sure you subscribe to the channel for future episodes and updates. The Juan Soto sweepstakes is still the number one storyline that everyone seems to be talking about. There are a ton of interested parties for Soto, and it seemed like it was a done deal that the New York Mets were going to outbid everyone else. And, Soto wanted money. It was a match made in heaven. And that was my pick for Juan Soto to go to the New York Mets. But now you start hearing more things about Juan Soto and these meetings that he's having with his teams. And it really makes you think, is money the only important thing to him? Can he, like Shohei Ohtani, leverage the Blue Jays, use the Mets' ability to, pay him well over $600 million to get a team that is in a better position for the next 10, 15 years that he's signed to build around him and win while still making $600+ million. And that's really what's been interesting is in these meetings, Juan Soto and Scott Boras, allegedly no numbers have been thrown out. So that Juan Soto's 660 from the Mets is not a real number. But in reality, it probably is around what the Mets would be willing to go to. And it makes it interesting because then you have teams like the Dodgers and like the Red Sox and like the Yankees and, the Blue Jays have met with him as well. He's asking, what is the pipeline like coming down the road? What kind of young players are going to be coming up around me? Because you obviously won't be able to pay as many high-end free agents paying me 50-60 million a year. But maybe you'll be able to surround me with a bunch of young studs. And that used to be the way that world champions were made not too long ago. You look at the Giants' young core, coming up and realizing their way to those 3 World Series titles. The Kansas City Royals' young core was able to have a couple of monster seasons and win a World Series. The Chicago Cubs, the first iteration of the Houston Astros. These teams were built on a pipeline of young, controllable, affordable talent. And they supplemented that talent with a few big names. And that's the way that I think a true contender should be made. It's not all about free agency. It's not all about prospect capital. It's about marrying the two. And Juan Soto's asking about the pipeline, which if you're a Yankee or Mets fan, isn't crazy strong. I mean, they have some names coming up, both teams, but neither one, has a super deep, young group of players that's going to be up in the major leagues, whereas the Dodgers or the Red Sox, for that matter, both have a lot of talent in their farm system with major league talent to, make that perfect marriage. So maybe $625 million from the Dodgers or the Red Sox will be more appealing than 650, 660 from the Mets or the Yankees. And that's an interesting dynamic that I don't think anyone was expecting from Juan Soto. I would not be surprised if Juan Soto puts an opt-out after 4 or 5 years into this mega deal. But at the same time, much like Bryce Harper when he hit free agency, a lot of people thought the same kind of thing, like he's going to have multiple opt-outs and, he's going to try to capitalize on the market. Bryce Harper, who hadn't even played for a second team yet, just wanted a place he could call home. A place that could build around him for a decade plus and, make that next step. And instead, Juan Soto, who's on his he's played in 3 teams now and he's 26 years old. Maybe he just wants to be somewhere for a while. And that's why that pipeline matters a lot more, not just for the immediate winning, but for the long-term, team that can be built around him as he slowly turns into a DH over time. Cause he's a good defender, but he's nothing special out there in right field. So that's a big development in the Juan Soto sweepstakes. It might not just be about money. He obviously wants money. He's not going to take $100 million discount to go to a team with a better farm system. But if teams with the better farm systems, the better young talent, the better pipeline, the more controlled major league talent have a say and make it close, he might not sign for the biggest offer on the table, which is very, very exciting for me as a Red Sox fan. That maybe the Red Sox have a chance to do this. This is one of the least risk-averse free agents we may have ever seen. He is such a mature hitter from when he came up to the major leagues to now. He has just a dominance of the strike zone, is very patient, works walks, slugs for a high percentage, and is one of the most dangerous hitters in the game. But while we've been waiting for Juan Soto to sign, there's been some early trades, some teams that have gotten first to market and said, well, while everyone's trying to figure out if they can add their big new shiny toy, I'm going to, zig while everyone's zagging, and I'm going to work in the margins. And the Mets acquired outfielder Jose Siri from the Tampa Bay Rays. And a lot of people kind of laughed at this, saying, oh, I guess they're out on Juan Soto now. They have Jose Siri. Right now, the Mets, Starling Marte is getting up there in age. But Harrison Bader is a free agent who I predicted to go back to the Mets. But now with the Jose Siri trade, it's looking like that might not happen. And Jose Siri, I think, is the perfect kind of guy as a third, fourth outfielder to add to the fold there. I know he hit 187 last year, but Jose Siri is a swaggy player. He has that attitude about him. He brings great energy. He was pimping solo shot home runs when the Rays were down 6 runs in games. He has speed. A lot of people were projecting him to be a 30-30 guy last year. If he was on base more, he might have been. But he's a guy that can, be a 20-20 kind of guy off your bench, platoon him, and he can play decent defense in center field. That's a nice piece for the Mets to add on a guy that's not being paid a lot of money. And the most exciting trade that happened so far actually just came in last night. And that is the Kansas City Royals, a team that, just went from one of the worst records in baseball to the ALDS. They were able to add Jonathan India from the Reds and Joey Wiemer, outfielder, to their roster. A team that had some of the worst hitting outfield in baseball last year. Joey Wiemer was a highly regarded prospect when he came up with Milwaukee. And, he's going to get an opportunity at everyday playing time. It's similar to me to the Jared Kelenic trade that the Braves made last offseason, just giving him a change of scenery and an opportunity to play every day and see if he can, live up to the hype. And Jonathan India, a guy who I think immediately upgrades their second base situation, a guy that can be that keystone combo with Bobby Witt Jr. up the middle. He's not an amazing defender, but he's a former rookie of the year and can, hit for a second baseman. And that's the kind of guy, he was a kind of the odd man out in Cincinnati with all their infield prospects. And the Royals, paid up to get him. Brady Singer goes over to the Cincinnati Reds. Now, Brady Singer is coming off a career year. It was a big part of the reason why the Royals had the success they had. He really made a comeback, and I think he got overshadowed because, Seth Lugo was a finalist for the Cy Young Award. Cole Reagans had a fantastic year. Michael Wacha got that extension because he, had a really nice bounce back year. But Brady Singer was a really, really solid pitcher for the Royals this year, had some big games, has some great stuff, and is a perfect guy for Terry Francona to add to that rotation, some stability. Past Hunter Green, the Reds, did not really have that. Nick Martinez had a solid year and is brought back on the qualifying offer, as I predicted. But the Reds, now have that big 3 in their rotation with Green, Martinez, and Singer, and they're able to, just see what happens between injury and performance with the Andrew Abbotts and Nick Lodolos of the world, and see, what cream rises to the top there. And, I would not be shocked if the Reds add another arm this offseason just for that depth purpose. But, getting a legitimate, back end starting pitcher in Brady Singer I think that's worth trading your surplus of infield. And I hope other teams that have surplus, wink, wink, the Orioles, look to make trades like this in the margins to really help their team moving forward in this winning window. It's the most wonderful time of the year, not because we'll be all stuffing our face with turkey and sides next week, but it's Hall of Fame season. I talked last week about the classic era ballot and how there was 8 names and a really, really just amazing ballot there where I think we'll have, 2 very deserving Hall of Famers added in Vic Harris and Tommy John. But the Baseball Writers Association ballot has been announced. We know all the guys that were there last season. They've been there for a while, and they're names that, are going to be revisited. Some of them are going to move up in the world. Some of them are not. But in terms of guys that might get elected this season, there's 3 names. There's Billy Wagner, who finished with 73.8% of the vote. I believe he was 4 or 5 votes shy from election last season. He's entering his 10th year on the ballot. It's do or die time for Billy Wagner. And I think because he is not Curt Schilling, he will be able to become a Hall of Famer this season. The other 2 are more interesting. They're guys that I think are obvious Hall of Famers, but the Hall of Fame is still kind of unsure. And that's Andrew Jones and Carlos Beltran. Andrew Jones is in his 8th year on the ballot. He got 61.6% of the vote. So he'd have to swing, about 14% there to get elected to the Hall of Fame, which is a doable jump. We've seen it in years past with people making that jump, but it's not guaranteed by any margin. Carlos Beltran's a little further away, 57.1%. This is going to be his 3rd year on the ballot. So he's already over 50% 2 years in. I think if Carlos Beltran was not a member of the 2017 Astros and was not a scapegoat for that, he'd already be in the Hall of Fame. But he's getting punished for that. I think a lot of writers are overlooking the amazing career that he has in terms of switch hitters with 400 career home runs. There's Mark Teixeira, who, was a really good slugging first baseman. There's Eddie Murray. There is Mickey Mantle. And there's Carlos Beltran. And that is just a really elite company. Chipper Jones as well. Those guys, all really good players. But if you notice, the only other outfielder, center fielder, is Mickey Mantle. Otherwise, those are corner power positions that are expected to hit 400 plus home runs. Carlos Beltran did that as a center fielder and was really good for a long time. Those are the 3 returning candidates that I think have a chance at being elected this year. But I would only go for Wagner this year. I don't think that Jones is going to make the jump, and I think Beltran's going to take at least 1 more year of growth to be in range for it. It's not impossible for him to, make that 18% jump that he needs, but I don't think that the momentum is there for Carlos Beltran this year. Now, there were a lot of names that make me feel old added to the Hall of Fame ballot this year, and I'm going to go in reverse order. I'm going to talk about guys with the lowest Hall of Fame meter all the way up to the obvious guys that if you have seen the ballot, you know who I'm talking about. Ben Zobrist was added to the ballot, was, one of the analytical darlings for the new era of success down in Tampa Bay. Had a really nice career where he helped as a veteran piece, those Cubs and Royals both win World Series championships, including winning the World Series MVP for the 2016 Chicago Cubs. Really good career, super utility guy, high WAR for, what he was, which was not a big power threat, not a big hit, not a big average guy either. Just a really solid player that you always would like to have on your team, and a guy that, very deserving. I always say this, it's an honor just to be on the ballot and, be named with these guys that have been on the ballot. It shows that you had at least a Hall of very good career. Adam Jones is next at a Hall of Fame meter at 36%. Adam Jones at one point felt like he was going to be a Hall of Famer, but, fell short of milestones that I look for, fell short of 2,000 hits, 1939, fell short at home runs of 300, 282. He's a 4-time Gold Glove winner. Made some all-star teams, was the face of the Orioles for a little while, and, just a really quality player. I love Adam Jones, but I don't think he's going to get the 5% of the vote. I've been seeing a lot of people saying that he will stay on the ballot, and I don't agree. I think the end of his career, he just tailed off too soon. Next, Carlos Gonzalez, 44% Hall of Fame meter. Cargo had a great nickname and had some really big seasons, but injuries derailed his career, and he was not able to, put together those consistent counting stats you'd like to see. And even from an analytic perspective, 24.4 career WAR. Unless you're a relief pitcher, that's not a kind of WAR total that's going to get you into the Hall of Fame. And I think it's really exciting just to see guys like this that I watched the majority of their career being on the Hall of Fame ballot, because, a lot of people will talk about the eye test, and I haven't been able to use the eye test moniker for a lot of these guys that are up for the Hall of Fame because I didn't really watch them. But now we're getting to the point where I'm old enough, ancient here at 25 years old, where I've seen a lot of this guy's career. And, Carlos Gonzalez, great player, and, an honor to be on the ballot, like I said. One of my favorite players that I watched as a kid, Troy Tulowitzki, is up for the Hall of Fame ballot. Two-time Gold Glove winner, two-time Silver Slugger, five-time All-Star, 44.5 career WAR, and a 290 career hitter. He was great. This was a guy on a Hall of Fame path. But the injuries, they added up. He only played over 140 games in a season 3 times in his 13-year major league career. And, great fielding shortstop. He got banged a lot because of the Coors effect. A lot of people were not taking him seriously, but for a good stretch there, he was amongst the best players in the National League and was considered the best shortstop in baseball. And it's cool to see him, at least get honored on being on the Hall of Fame ballot. I don't think Tulo gets 5%. Curtis Granderson is a lot closer than people want to give him credit for. This is a guy who was only a 3-time All-Star, but 344 career home runs and a 47.2 career WAR. The average isn't where you'd like to see it, being 249 for a career, but he scored over 1,200 runs in his career. He drove in 937 runs, 1,800 career hits. Really good career, really stand-up guy that I always appreciated, even when he was playing for the Evil Empire, and a guy that deserved to be on this ballot. As a guy, might get one vote in that elite one vote for the Hall of Fame club guy. I would not be shocked if Curtis Granderson is able to get a vote from someone. Hanley Ramirez, similar story to Tulo, was considered at his peak one of the best shortstops in the game, but wasn't able to, put together the career that you'd like to see. But still, a Rookie of the Year, 3-time All-Star, 2-time Silver Slugger, 289 career hitter, despite his struggles, 1,800 career hits, 271 career home runs, 1,049 runs scored, and 917 runs batted in. It's a similar story for a lot of these guys. All of these hitters, except for one that have been added to the Hall of Fame ballot this year, do not have 2,000 career hits. The rule of 2,000 has been pretty important to the Hall of Fame. Since the expansion era, nobody with under 2,000 hits has been elected by the writers. It's been all era committee selections. And I think Andrew Jones, because of the 10 Gold Gloves and the 400 career home runs, he's going to be the first one to break that moniker. But these guys don't have those superlatives that Andrew Jones has to, stick around and be in that category. But a great career nonetheless. Another very interesting one that a lot of people are touting for the Hall of Fame, and one of my favorite pitchers I've ever watched. That's King Felix Hernandez. 49.7 career WAR, 2 ERA titles, a Cy Young, 6-time All-Star, 3.42 ERA. He was a slightly above 500 pitcher in his career, 169 and 136. He played for some bad Seattle Mariners teams. Just truly, truly bad teams that didn't do enough for him. He had his amazing Cy Young season in 2010, when, despite going 13-12, he had a 7.2 WAR, 227 ERA, 249 innings led the league, and over 200 strikeouts. He was a horse. He came up at a very young age at 19 and was productive early on in his career. Unfortunately, after 2014, he kind of fell off the wagon. There was a ton of innings pitched, in those early years. And it was, not what you'd like to see from Felix Hernandez the rest of the way. I think he was on a Hall of Fame path through his first 2,000 innings pitched, but those last, 700 innings were not Hall of Fame quality. Felix Hernandez was the first guy, before Jacob deGrom, where the writers looked past, wins and strikeouts and ERA and really dove into the whole package for Cy Young voting. So I would not be shocked if the analytical baseball writers are able to, keep him on the ballot. I think he's going to get 5%. But Felix Hernandez, as much as I loved watching him pitch in that perfect game in 2015, was, at a moment that I was rocking as a baseball fan. Felix Hernandez is not a Hall of Famer to me. And I don't think that he's going to be able to build enough of a case. But if anyone's going to break the mold, it would not shock me that it's the guy that broke the mold with the Cy Young Award, breaks the mold with the Hall of Fame. So Felix Hernandez, I think he'll stick around, but I don't think he's going to get well into the 20% range like we saw Chase Utley do a big analytical case last season. Now, Ian Kinsler, like I said, everyone other than one has under 2,000 career hits. Ian Kinsler retired with 1,999 career hits. Ian Kinsler, 54.1 career WAR, 257 home runs, 269 hitter, won a couple Gold Gloves, 4-time Silver Slugger, was a champion with the 2018 World Series Red Sox. I think if Ian Kinsler came back at age 38, he probably would get serious Hall of Fame consideration from some people. I think having under 2,000 hits really hurts him, and I know by only one. But I think that's going to be the difference between him being a guy that gets that 5% and doesn't get that 5%. So I think Ian Kinsler is going to fall off year one, but he is closer than the majority of the guys on this list. Dustin Pedroia. As a Red Sox fan, I'm biased. I absolutely love him. Much like Tulowitzki, a really high WAR total for a guy who had all the injuries. He had 51.9 career WAR. He was a Rookie of the Year. He's an MVP. He's part of 3 World Series championships for the Boston Red Sox, but the counting stats aren't there. 1,805 career hits, not 2,000. 140 career home runs. 299 career hitter, so he's not even a 300 career hitter. 922 runs scored, 725 runs driven in. OPS plus of 113 for his career. Yeah, great player. Great player. A guy that you would want on your team, a guy I looked up to as a kid. But PD is not a Hall of Famer. Now, because of Chase Utley's support on the ballot, I would not be shocked if Pedroia gets the 5% necessary to stay on. He was, one of those guys at the second base position, especially that, is underrepresented in the Hall, and that's a big argument for Utley. I think PD has a much better chance of getting 5% than Ian Kinsler. But if both of them fall off, I will not be upset. I don't think either one of them are Hall of Fame worthy. Now, the two big dogs. CC Sabathia. And this is where I'm going to step up on a soapbox. The amount of people, including Yankees fans, that I have seen talking since the ballot was released earlier this week, talking about CC Sabathia as a borderline candidate, talking about CC Sabathia as a guy who they're not even voting for, and they're voting for Felix Hernandez, but not CC Sabathia. What is going on with the world? CC Sabathia is one of 3 left-handed pitchers in the history of baseball with over 3,000 strikeouts. There's only 19 pitchers in the 3,000 strikeout club. It is more elite than the 300 win club, which we say we'll never see again. There's less people with 3,000 Ks. And CC Sabathia is one of them. The only 2 members of the 3,000 strikeout club that have been eligible for the Hall of Fame and been disregarded is Curt Schilling, who's a jerk, and Roger Clemens, who probably did steroids. That's it. Every other 3,000 strikeout guy has gotten into the Hall of Fame. 62.3 career WAR. 60 is when WAR matters to me. And for a pitcher, it's even more impressive to get there because they only pitch every 5th day. Won the Cy Young in 2007 with the Cleveland Indians. 6-time All-Star, 2009 World Series champion with the Yankees, their most recent World Series title. We talk all the time about this made-up narrative about, can he perform in New York? Can he perform in the big market? Well, CC Sabathia went from spending the first 9 years of his career in Cleveland and Milwaukee, which, no offense to those great baseball cities and fan bases, but those are mid-markets at best, signs a huge contract with the New York Yankees to be their missing piece, to be their ace, to be the guy that brings them back to the promised land. And in year one of that contract, he wins 19 games, leading the league. He is top 5 in Cy Young, top 4 in Cy Young voting his first 3 years with the Yankees. Wins a World Series title right away. Those 3 years were money and worth every dollar the Yankees paid him. And then people get upset because the rest of his career in New York, he was a league average pitcher. I'll tell you something. A league average pitcher, a guy that takes the ball every 5th day, doesn't miss time. You know, he had some injuries at the very end. A guy that takes the ball, saves your bullpen, is a great leader of men in the clubhouse. CC Sabathia was super valuable even on the back end of his contract when he wasn't a Cy Young candidate. And those years of being a league average pitcher helped him compile over 250 wins. It helped him compile over 3,000 strikeouts. It helped him compile over 60 WAR. These things that are going to get him into the Hall of Fame first ballot. We talk all the time about the new age of the starting pitcher and how Felix Hernandez might be the one to change the mold. How Chris Sale, who just won his first career Cy Young, is now back on the Hall of Fame path despite having no shot at 200 wins. And a guy with 250 wins and 3,000 strikeouts and a Cy Young is borderline? Are you kidding me? Not even a candidate for you? A guy that deserves your vote to get the 5% necessary to stay on? You'd rather vote for Felix Hernandez? Are we kidding? I'm getting on my soapbox for CC Sabathia because the disrespect has gotten out of hand. He is a guy that should be celebrated. He is a guy who is one of the best pitchers I've ever seen. And I don't care that Father Time got to him in his 30s and that he wasn't a Cy Young candidate in his late 30s like we've seen the Justin Verlanders and the Randy Johnsons of the world do. It's like in the NFL. Not everybody is Tom Brady and Drew Brees. Look at Aaron Rodgers. Doesn't make him not a Hall of Famer just because in his late 30s, he wasn't an MVP candidate. He wasn't driving his team to the postseason every year. Come on, people. We're better than this. We're better than this. And finally, the guy who a lot of people are expecting to be unanimous. I am not, just knowing how the Hall of Fame likes to vote. But Ichiro Suzuki is going to be on the Hall of Fame ballot this season. He's going to be the first Japanese-born player to be elected to Cooperstown. And a lot of people, just like last year with Adrian Beltre, he's the boring guy to talk about. But is he? Ichiro Suzuki came over to Japan at 27 years of age. 27. That's a late call-up for a major leaguer. He won 10 straight gold gloves. He won Rookie of the Year and MVP in his first season. 5 Silver Slugger awards. And during his time in Seattle, led the league in games played 4 times. Led the league in WAR in 2004 when he finished 7th in MVP voting. 9.2 WAR season. Doesn't even get to be put on the pedestal. He led the league in hits 7 times in his first 10 seasons. Led the league in stolen bases as a rookie with 56 and had multiple other seasons of 30 and 40 plus. With a career stolen bases of 509. 300 is a good stolen base number for me. 509 from 27 on. 3,089 hits from 27 on. 1,420 runs scored from 27 on. This is one of the greatest players most of us have ever seen. And yeah, he's from the era of guys like Tony Gwynn and Wade Boggs, who sacrificed all power to be this elite contact bat-to-ball guy. Still hit 117 career home runs. That's a lot more than Rod Carew. And was a .311 career hitter, despite playing Major League Baseball at the age of 44 years old. 27 to 44. Yeah, he compiled a little bit, but you didn't get half of his prime. Ichiro Suzuki should be unanimous. I know the way the Baseball Writers of America operate, he will not be, but he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and Cooperstown is going to be stuffed to the brim with Japanese fans and Mariners fans packing the yard for him. So my final prediction for the Baseball Writers Association ballot is Ichiro Suzuki first ballot, CC Sabathia first ballot, Billy Wagner 10th and final ballot, and that's it. For first-year guys, I do think that Felix Hernandez gets the necessary 5% to stay on, and I do think that Andrew Jones and Carlos Beltran inch closer to the finish line. There's a lot of other guys in the middle that, jumps would be huge. I'm very interested to see how Chase Utley does on this year's ballot after getting 28% of the vote in his first year, which I thought was very, very high. Guys like Manny Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez are going to, go up a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see, at the end of the ballot, David Wright stayed on at 6.2%. Does he stay on again? Torrey Hunter stayed on at 7.3%. Does he stay on again? K-Rod 7.8%. Does he stay on? Is he the next reliever now that Billy Wagner gets elected? Mark Burley, 8.3%. Does he stay on? I know my buddy Jake is a proponent of Mark Burley for the Hall of Fame. I'd be okay with it, but I'm not pushing for him either. But the Baseball Writers Association, I think we're going to have 2 from the Veterans Committee and 3 from the writers. That's a big Hall of Fame class, 5 guys. I'm very excited for it. And it's, one of the best releases ever. January 12th, they'll be announcing who made in through the writers, and December 8th, we will find out who made it through the era committee. Here at the Solo Shot Sports Podcast, we get to throw back down the third baseline to this day in baseball history. And there was a ton of moments here on November 23rd that I could have talked about. A lot of award season stuff, a lot of, moves that were made. But we talked about these early trades and how don't let them, fly under the radar just because we're all waiting for Juan Soto. We're all waiting for Corbin Burns and Blake Snell, and will Garrett Crochet get traded, and Nolan Arenado and XYZ. But on this date, in 2016, Ketel Marte and Taijuan Walker were traded from the Seattle Mariners to the Arizona Diamondbacks. And this was for, Mitch Haniger and some boys. But Ketel Marte, since joining the Arizona Diamondbacks in 2017, has 28.7 career WAR. That's an average of 3.6 per season, or 5 for every 162. 521 runs, 140 home runs, 465 RBIs, a guy 283 batting average, 125 OPS plus. He's been one of the best, utility second baseman in baseball. Played a little outfield, played a little second base. Ketel Marte, at this time in 2016, was looked at as like, okay, like that's a guy the Diamondbacks can, find a place for. Maybe that's Jonathan India for the Kansas City Royals. And he goes on a run next to Bobby Witt Jr. as a really productive middle infielder. We'll never know, but don't overlook these small trades now just because it's not the big moves. Sometimes the teams that win are the ones that play chess while everyone else is trying to play checkers. And that rounds out the show here because we're at the calm before the storm. I mean, I told you the holidays, everyone's waiting for the winter meetings. I think that's when a lot of stuff's going to start getting done. It's kind of a lull in the off season, let alone all this rain we've been having up here in the Northeast, which I know is needed because of the drought, but kind of sucks, especially when it's cold outside. But this is the calm before the storm. I mean, I'm expecting in the coming weeks for a lot of stuff to happen. There's a lot of guys that need to find new homes. There's a lot of teams that are looking to trade pieces, and there's a lot that will be done here in the 2025 off season. I appreciate each and every one of you for spending part of your Solo Shot Saturday with me. Remember to give the video a like, leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or however you may be listening. Appreciate you for spending part of your Saturday with me. If you're listening to this post recording, thank you as well, and hope you're having a great week. I'll be here every Saturday giving you updates on everything that happens here in Major League Baseball and throwing it back in time to remind you about the great history of this game. So this is Dom Manna. I'll catch you guys next week.